Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. Welcome back to the library. I know many of you are not here. There's a few students around the school, but I'm here today and I'm going to be reading the next chapter, chapter 6 of Notorious by Gordon Corman. So last time in chapter 5, both kids had gone back to school. Keenan had gone to his new American school, and ZB has to travel off island to go to the Canadian school. So we had Keenan making some friends and getting to know the kids that ZB was kind of afraid of him becoming closer than her with. So I think she's often kind of lonely. At least that's my impression so far. So chapter 6 is from Zarabeth's perspective, and we'll get started right now. The 18-minute ferry ride from Corunna onto the mainland to Centerlight might as well be an ocean crossing. It's a bright sunny day, but you can't tell by the passengers on the deck. We're suffocating in the black cloud that billows out of the smokestack and swirls all around us. It's still better than going below decks. That's where the little kids hang out with their mothers and nannies who escort them to and from school. You can't imagine the noise. When you're that age, there's only one volume setting, 11. Whether they're laughing or crying or describing the high and low points of their day, the screaming never stops. Even up here, over the thrum of the engine, you can still hear the squeals. I'm the only non-high schooler on deck, so nobody pays any attention to me. There seem to be a lot of couples this year. I give that about 5 minutes. The ferry ride is usually the place for some spectacular breakups. But this is only the first day. A lot of relationships bit the dust on that day last April when the ferry lost power, and we floated for 3 hours before the tugboat came. And even then, it was kind of an international incident because it was an American tugboat rescuing a Canadian ferry. Grade 7. Yawn. Every September, the teachers tell us how the party's over and how serious everything's going to get, so we have to buckle down. But so far, grade 7 looks a lot like a reboot of grade 6, with everybody a year older. Big surprise. We have to write about something that happened during summer vacation. I'm going to do my paper on Keenan and how I helped him recover from tuberculosis. Keenan is really interesting because he's lived in all these cool places, which is great except for the getting tuberculosis part. The thing is, Keenan hasn't told me that much about the countries he's lived in, other than the fact that he's lived there. And the international schools don't sound so special except for where they're located. His friends over there sound exactly like the kind of kids that you could meet here. So-and-so who memorized almost every single rap lyric, and so-and-so who was on the swim team or the track team, or the robotics team, and so who Keenan went to Taekwondo class. You don't have to fly to a distant continent to find that. There isn't even anybody on the list as interesting as, let's say, someone who lives in a house that used to belong to a notorious gangster. Anyway, when Keenan and I hung out together, I usually do most of the talking. After all, when I first knew him, he could get out of breath easily. That's not true anymore. But when friends set up a pattern like that, it sticks. Plus, at the beginning, Keenan knew nothing about the history of Centerlight and all the gangsters who used to operate here. You can't blame Keenan and me if people like Al Capone and Tommy Gun Ferguson are a lot more exciting than a bunch of random cities around the globe. As we cross the river, I'm tempted to call ahead and let him know I'm on the way. The problem is, it's an international long-distance call, even though he lives only a few blocks from my house, and my phone is on a Canadian plan, so talking to the United States costs $2 a minute. Even though you could probably yell there for free, or even stretch a string between two cans. It's Dad's fault he has to use a Canadian carrier for work, and with my brother, Wayne, in Toronto, it just makes sense. But $2 a minute can really add up, especially when you have as much to say as I do. And when that big bill comes in, do you think Dad appreciates the impossible situation he's put me in? No, he confiscates my phone. It's a border officer thing. They just can't stop confiscating stuff. It's like a compulsion. So the phone stays in my pocket, and the 18 minutes passes like 18 years. Finally, we make it to Centerlight, where the red maple leaf of Canada flies over the lighthouse. It's Tuesday, our day. The wharf lets us out onto Laurier Park, which turns into Jefferson Park where the border bisects it, about halfway through. I head straight for Keenan's house, but I haven't left the park yet when a voice hails me. Zeeby! Over here! I wheel. There are a lot of kids in the park. The middle school is just over the rise. A sprawling game of frisbee is underway, the spinning disc crossing an international frontier on almost every throw, and in the middle of it, jumping up and down waving, is Keenan. I'm confused for an instant, although actually it makes perfect sense. He spent all day at school, same as I did, but he didn't have to leave his classmates back on the mainland. They're all right here in the park, hanging out and having a great time. I can't help experiencing a stab of disappointment. A week ago, I was the only person on Centerlight he knew. Bummer. But I should have seen it coming. It's not like that was going to last. As I start to jog over, the frisbee comes sailing at Keenan. The throw is off target, high and to the left, but somehow he takes off in a spectacular leap, legs splayed out in a near split. He makes the catch with the tip of a finger before crashing to the grass. Keenan's still for a moment, then his arm shoots up, holding the frisbee in triumph. Not bad for a guy who was laid out with TB just a couple of weeks ago. I can kind of see the junior taekwondo master he used to be. It's probably only a matter of time before he nails that kick in his training sessions with creepy musclehead. The others mob him and haul him to his feet in a blizzard of back slaps and high fives. That's when I start to recognize people. That jerk Ronnie and kid Joey he hangs out with. Carl is there, and this girl Gabrielle. We used to be best friends as little kids, but grew apart when I started going to school on the mainland. More faces come into view. Ethan. His mother swung a snow shovel at Barney once. I'll bet the teeth marks are still in the scoop. Lisette. She had her bar mitzvah this spring, and I was the only girl on the island our age who didn't get invited. Her uncle called the cops on us once because Barney messed with the tow hitch on his truck and unhooked his motorboat trailer. He had to drop the charges, though, because nobody could figure out which court to take us to. Even though the boat was parked in the United States, by the time it had rolled down the hill and hit the tree, it had crossed into Canada. I see kids I went to preschool with, kids who now barely glance in my direction when I pass them on the street. Zeeby, Keenan calls again. I execute a 180 and get out of there, pretending I don't hear him. There's a lump in my throat that I can't quite explain. I always knew that he was going to meet other people. I just kept myself from admitting it, that it would be those people. Ignoring him, I leave the park and turn onto my street. Our house is kind of unique. Tommy Gunn Ferguson built a little cupola on the roof so that he could post a guard to look out for police and rival gangsters. Sometimes I sit up there and survey the neighborhood, just in case not all of those gangsters are in the past. I know people have been sulking around our house, whether Dad believes me or not. We really should have surveillance cameras, but Dad's too cheap. I was saving up to buy some on my own, but it turns out they're more expensive than I thought. Anyway, if you can't afford cameras, a good lookout spot is the next best thing. I was going to show it to Keenan one day soon. I wonder if that's ever going to happen now. I enter the house and practically trip over Barney too, who's waiting just inside the door. He's been sitting there ever since you left this morning, my mother makes a point of informing me. I see what she's up to. She's judging me. She thinks I have to love this dog just because he's dumb enough to love me for no reason. Well, it won't work. Already his yipping and wagging is getting on my nerves, and I've only been home for 10 seconds. If that was the real Barney, I say belligerently, he would have busted down that door instead of waiting for me to come home through it. He had character. Remember, Mum returns, if Barney had a little less character, this family would have a lot less debt. She's thinking about the fines. We had to pay those, since Barney obviously didn't have any money, or she might mean the dog food bill, which wasn't small. I think Mr. Chaikin overcharged us. We bought our kibble in the same place Barney went hunting for cheese. I'm not in the mood to argue, so I grab an apple and head up to the copula by myself. I might as well get used to it. And anyway, I can't even manage that. Barney, too, follows me there, his little toenails clicking on the metal steps. The real Barney never made any noise approaching a click. With him, it was either a resounding thwomp or nothing. Go away, I say listlessly. His tail wags even faster. I do some homework on my iPad, but I can't finish because the internet connection keeps cutting out on me. That's Tommy Gun Ferguson for you. Great at killing people, not so good at building a house for reliable Wi-Fi. I've been down there about an hour when I spot Keenan heading down our street. A moment later, I hear the doorbell, followed by Mum's voice. "ZB, your friend is on his way up." I'm actually annoyed. I was planning to show him the copula eventually, but on my schedule. And then he's tackling the metal stairs, his school bag on his shoulder, his cheeks red with exertion, which means he hasn't been home yet. He's come straight from the park where he's been all this time, with them. "Hi, ZB. I saw you getting off the ferry. Didn't you hear me?" "Yeah, well," I say, "I don't go where I'm not wanted." "What do you mean not wanted?" he retorts. "You were wanted. I was calling you." "You were calling. One person out of 20. He shrugs. "They're my friends. They can be your friends, too." Friends one day at that school, and Keenan has friends. "You don't have to introduce us," I remind him. "I was born here, so were most of them." "Aw, ZB, don't be like that. They're not so bad. I've been all over the world. Kids are the same everywhere." Suddenly, I need to change the subject. Check this out. Check out this view, eh? Tommy Gun Ferguson built this copula. He called it his lookout tower. Keenan elevates that brow. "I guess it didn't work out too well. He got arrested, right?" I nod. "Your lookout tower is only as good as your lookout. The guy cut a deal with the FBI to save himself from going to prison." The brow rises even further. I feel like I'm the one that's not on trial, not Tommy Gun. Or so I've heard, I add. The brow comes down again. "Anyway," I go on, that was it for Tommy Gun. When the feds kicked the door in, there was no time to get into the hidey hole." Keenan's intrigued. "There's a hidey hole? Yeah, you want to see it?" "Just that you said he had a big stash of gold and nobody ever found it." "I thought of that years ago," I tell him. "The hidey hole is just a trap door in the back of a closet. Barney claimed it, but he thought it was a toilet. We had to shovel it out every couple of days. Dad wasn't a big fan of that, let me tell you. Anyway, the only thing you'll find there now is Wayne's old hockey equipment. No gold." I can see he's hooked, so I gave him the tour of the house, Barney too at our heels. I might get a little too creative about the gangster connection. For example, that brown spot on the kitchen counter could be where Dutch Schultz once stabbed out a cigar, but it could have been a bunch of other things too. All we know for sure is that it won't come off, not even with CLR. His eyes practically bug out of his head when the fireplace tools on the hearth catch the sunlight and gleam yellow gold. "Brass," I explain. "My mom got them from eBay a couple of months ago. Most of our stuff didn't come with the house, but," I point to a large frame map of Centerlight on the wall, opposite the fireplace. "That was here when we moved in." I led him over to the stand in front of it. "You think it belonged to Tommy Gun?" he asks. "Not originally," I reply. "It's from the 1880s, even before his time. You see a few of those around town. The first official map of the island after Canada and the United States decided where the border was going to be." "Pretty cool," he comments. "Yeah, cool. This isn't the first time I've stared at that squiggly line that looks like a dizzy ant staggered his way across the paper. That line is the reason why Keenan has a full roster of friends after only a few hours at school, and I've got only him." That's the end of chapter 6. So, next chapter is chapter 7 called Ronnie. So this must be a new person's perspective, and we'll find out more about that when we see you at our next chapter. Goodbye for now. We'll see you later.